Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by CyberArk on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Brian Ware, the Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency at the Homeland Security Department. Brian, we've been talking a lot about current priorities, things that are happening in programs like CDM. We've been talking a lot about cyber threat intelligence and the sharing of it. Let me ask you just more generally, what are some of your priorities? As you mentioned, you're fairly new to the role as Assistant Director for Cybersecurity. What are you trying to get done over the next 6 or 9 months?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's been a big part of my focus in my first few weeks and months on the job. I think one thing I'll observe about CISA, and maybe it is true for a lot of the government more broadly, is that the workforce goes to work every day and works really hard, putting one foot after another, usually in the direction of a plan or a program that was set out maybe a few years back, or a concept that's a few years back. And so we go to work to make progress every single day. By me being able to come in as a new guy from the outside, I certainly recognize that and appreciate that, but I wanted to try to take a look 5 years out and say, what do we think, from everything we know right now, what do we think that world is going to look like? And what do we think those threats and risks are going to look like? And what do we need to do to build the most relevant organization that we can have to addressing that risk posture that we see in the future? And so I spent the first few months on the job building what we're calling the CSD 2025 strategy. So the Cybersecurity Directorate's strategy, looking ahead 5 years. And it's built around the knowledge that our adversaries have grown more and more sophisticated. Our networks, we're losing that perimeter. Departments and agencies have moved to the cloud and to SaaS. So much more of the traffic on the networks today is encrypted than it was years ago. And when I take a lot of these things and I put them together, many of the ways that we've kind of traditionally thought of our job, of where we put sensors and what those sensors look like and how we secure things, is not as aligned with the way that enterprise IT and the mission are moving in the future. And so there's a number of components of that long-term strategy, but I'll focus on 3 of them really quickly right now. So one of those is to get to the place where CISA has as close to complete visibility as we can have of everything that's happening in the .gov, but also we need visibility on what's going on in industry and state and local, because our adversaries don't really stay in just one camp or the other. So we need to push for visibility. If you think about the legacy or the origins of CDM, departments and agencies got more visibility, but CISA got reports. And now we're in an environment where we need to be quicker than that. We need to have more near real-time visibility. And so adjusting the way that the way that the tools work, the way that the relationships work, the way that the authorities work, these are not profound adjustments, but they're adjustments to get to the place where we can see that threat across the entire landscape, or we can see that risk across the entire landscape and do a better job of delivering the appropriate controls, responses, advisories, whatever that might be. A second part of our strategy is to rethink the way that we deliver products and services. So QSMO, which is one of my least favorite acronyms, but stands for the Quality Service Management Office for Cybersecurity. We received a QSMO designation from OMB, worked really closely with the federal CIO and CISO to put that together. This is a different way for us to deliver products and services than CDM. And again, I love everything that we've done with CDM, but there are some things that we think that we can do where there's a one-stop shop for all the best of breed products and services that every department and agency and maybe beyond can choose. It can select those products. And I think what we're going to get out of that is efficiencies, better alignment across government, working with the vendors of those products and services to ensure that we can use the data effectively on the backside to get to that visibility that I was referring before. It's harder to do when everything is kind of purchased and deployed on an independent department-to-department basis than if we can come to a more well understood and standardized set of tools. And then the third part of the strategy I'll touch on today is really making significant investments in cloud. We have to move to where our customers are moving. As they move their applications, their payloads, their business services into cloud and SaaS environments, we can't let that mean that we lose visibility. We just need to move to where they are. So we have to rethink the idea of sensors. We need to rethink that about acquiring data from the cloud providers, acquiring that telemetry, seeing both what's happening on-prem as well as in a hybrid environment. But it's not just that. We need to do a better job internally at leveraging all of the data holdings that we have. Make sure that every bit of that visibility, we're running it through analytics, we're running it through orchestration so that we can be a more nimble, a more agile hunt organization or response organizations. We can deliver insights to our customer base. So the cloud strategy for us is making sure that we can build and deploy a very secure cloud, that we can maintain and monitor our activity, but all the rest of the government's activity in the cloud, and that we really leverage the analytics that we think that we can get there to drive better mission performance from a speed perspective. But I think also just I think once we're able to harness all that data, I think we're really going to unlock the amazing qualities of our analysts at really delivering top-notch security results to the .gov and again beyond that. That's a lot, but that's it.
That's a lot. It's only 3 at that. But we're going to have our first argument. I'm sorry, Brian, but CUSMO is the greatest acronym in government.
Well, it doesn't flow trippingly from the tongue, as Shakespeare might wish. And it is sometimes said CUSMO or Quizmo, or I don't know.
I understand. Let me start, though, however, with the visibility piece and just offer a little bit more, because I think it's tied to the cloud strategy because of, as you mentioned, so many agencies are moving to the cloud. We've seen this, for instance, with the Small Business Administration and how they've taken CDM to the cloud. Have they taken some pilots for TIC in the cloud? How do those two work together, and where does CISA kind of fit into that discussion?
Well, I mean, we believe that departments and agencies can derive not only mission benefits and efficiencies benefits, but they can derive security benefits from operating within the cloud. But we can't just expect that that's going to happen or take that for granted that that's going to happen. So we've got to do the work to build good cloud guidance. And we can't build good cloud guidance unless we're eating our own dog food, right? So I want to see, and this is what we've been doing for the last several months, we're really engaging across all the cloud vendors to ensure that we know how to use their cloud services in the most effective way, not only from a mission perspective, but also from a security, and I could extend security into privacy and other features. Now, if we did that and we just wrote it in a report and it said, this is our cloud guidance, that'd be one thing. But I mean, if we can configure cloud services to be default secure for our own purposes, really where I want us to lean ahead is, and how much of that can we deliver to other departments and agencies so that they can acquire from the cloud providers a secure cloud service. And when they do that, and this is part of our work with those providers, is to ensure that we're going to see the telemetry from that to accomplish those visibility goals, so that we're not blind because we're sitting at a sensor on the network, but we're also using the capabilities of the cloud providers and the tools that are in the cloud to give us the same kind of visibility that a network sensor would have, but just rethinking the word sensor to be a more data-oriented term than a device-oriented term.
In some ways, is DHS or CISA talking to cloud vendors to provide, and again, now we'll tie back around to shared services, part of that discussion around shared services. So here is a set of tools that we've vetted, for lack of a better word, or we've worked with those providers to ensure that that data that data can come back to CISA. Is that where you're heading down? Versus, I know CISA well enough to say you're not going to say everyone should use widget X because that's the only widget. You wouldn't be able to do that. That would cause too many other problems. But you're looking at a set of standards or a set of, if you will, here are 10 tools that you should look at that can feed us back data that we need?
Yeah, I mean, realizing that I'm talking a 5-year strategy. So some of the things I'm mentioning in particular, these are not things that I expect that we'll be doing next year. But if you look at cloud breaches that have occurred, the majority of them, perhaps, or certainly the noteworthy ones, were misconfigurations of the cloud service. And so I think it's just reasonable to expect that as departments and agencies and others, move services to the cloud, there is a potential for misconfiguration errors that lead to those breaches. And so in my mind, if we can work with each of those vendors to ensure how to, by default, have good configurations and by default have good security controls, and if we can work, and we are working with our colleagues in CIA that set up the commercial cloud service, the C2S program, and DoD setting up the JEDI program, looking at the things that they did, the considerations they made, so that we could, on behalf of the federal executive branch, provide some of those similar capabilities. Now, whether we provide them in the same way as C2S or JEDI did, I'm not saying that just yet. But what I don't want is for every one of those agencies to kind of have to roll their own using really the same handful of cloud services. If we can try to systemically work with them to by default, have a secure operating environment for departments and agencies. And again, that in some ways is just really good IT, but that really good IT, I think, will allow us to minimize many security vulnerabilities that we would see if we did it any other way.
Brian, we're just about out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation. I could probably talk to you for another 45 minutes here. One quick question that just comes to mind: the CSD 2025 strategy, is that completed? Is that going to be made public? Where are you at with that effort?
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be completed, but there is at least a pretty good reflection of it. And we turned it into operating plans and annual plans. I did a virtual industry day with my team a few weeks ago, and we briefed that to several hundred industry participants, some that are current CISA contractors and others that are not. We've been briefing it on the Hill. And so it's not something that we are publishing in PDF form to download on the website just yet, but it's something we really want to spend time talking with you about, so that your listeners, your watchers can have a good idea of where we're going. But you'll see this in all of our forthcoming procurements and priorities. We are acquiring cloud services right now. We're doing our first QSMO pilots right now. So everything that we're doing this year is really just the starting points to that long-term strategy, and trying to pivot as many of our legacy programs as we can into that future operating environment.
I did hear about that industry day, and I was a little disappointed I wasn't invited, but that, I know that's maybe not your decision, so we'll talk to your folks about that for another time.
All right.
Brian, this has been just a fascinating conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so let me thank my guest, Brian Ware, the Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Homeland Security Department. Brian, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by CyberArk on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Ask the CIO.